Hi everyone, welcome to this brand new episode of the Ditch the Diet podcast. Thank you for joining me for another episode of the Ditch the Diet podcast. This is the podcast for anyone who is absolutely sick, fed up of yo-yo dieting and wants to start learning the truth about food, nutrition, health and exercise and everything in between. So if you are a brand new listener, thank you very much for joining. Make sure you hit the subscribe button so that you don't miss out on any future episodes. And if you are a regular listener, welcome back. Thank you very much for coming back for another episode. Please don't forget to leave a review on iTunes if you're listening on Apple Podcasts. Just take a couple of minutes at the end of this episode if you can and just give us a little 5-star rating. It makes all the difference. So welcome to this new episode. Thanks for being here. I have spoken to a registered nutritionist, Anna Cummings, in this episode regarding something that I find really interesting, and that is we are discussing the topic of calories, and is it really just about calories? That's what we're answering in this podcast episode, and this is sort of in response to a lot of the social media and things that are going around just now, coaches, various different people online telling us that we should just be thinking about getting into a calorie deficit if our goal is to lose weight. And I wanted to discuss with Anna today about why that is not entirely true and what exactly we should be focusing on instead, first and foremost. You'll find there are loads and loads and loads of memberships out there that you can join online, pay a monthly subscription, and they'll give you a set of calories to work towards. You've got to log all your food on an app on your phone and count your steps, and will often ridicule you if you can't do it. So I've heard anyway. And we want to tell you that it's absolutely okay to stop counting calories or never ever begin to count calories, hopefully, because there is so much more to it than that. So without any further rambling from me, let's get on with the show. So thank you very much, Anna, for joining me for this episode of the Ditch the Diet podcast. Before we get started, and I'm really excited about what we're about to talk about today, let's just get a bit of an introduction from you. So who are you and what do you do?
Yeah, absolutely. It's really good to be here. Thank you so much for having me. So I am a registered nutritionist with the British Association for Nutrition and Lifestyle Medicine. I have a background in sports science. I'm also a qualified PT with various kind of coaching for behaviour change qualifications. And I've been working with people to change their lifestyle for about a decade now. And as well as having my own clients, I work for Liva Health, and I believe that you already spoke with Dr. Roger Henderson, who's our medical director, which is fantastic. So for Liva, they are a digital health coaching service, and they deliver personalised health coaching programs to the NHS, as well as working with private companies. They deliver it kind of on a one-to-one basis, as well as providing peer support, group support within the service as well. And for Liva, I'm working with them as their coaching and nutrition development manager. So essentially what that means is that I help to support the team of Liva coaches, as well as being involved with developing them, training coaches, as well as coaching myself. I contribute to the design of the coaching programs that we are designing for partners, and contributing to the development of the information that people receive when they take part in one of our programs to ensure that, it's evidence-based. They can trust the source of information that's coming through. And yeah, it's very varied, which I absolutely love, and all around kind of helping people to find what their version of healthy looks like, which is really important to me.
That sounds brilliant. That sounds like such an interesting role.
It's so interesting. Yeah,
Yeah, I
I'm
bet.
such a health geek.
Yeah, I am as well.
So for me, it's completely perfect. I absolutely love it.
So what sort of interested you in nutrition and health in the first place? Like there must be a reason why like you decided to study it and do what you're
Absolutely.
doing now. What was your main interest in the beginning?
100%. Well, I think it's been kind of a long and winding road of learning every day, to be honest with you. But essentially, I started extremely exercise focused. I was one of those people who was super into sport at school, ended up doing sports science at uni, definitely had an attitude that nutrition doesn't matter.
Mm-hmm.
It's just exercise, and kind of existed on a pasta and cereal and barely a vegetable in sight when I was at university.
Sounds familiar.
Don't we all, not forgetting the wine as well, happy that happened. And further I got into my degree, the more interested I became in the relationship between nutrition and physiology. In particular, my interest in nutrition really started with how the body reacts in extreme environments to manipulation of our nutritional intake, so severe cold, for example, which was very specific and focused, but started me off on my interest and long understanding the impact that nutrition can have on the way that we function, which isn't something that I'd fully appreciated before. Um, and out of uni, I ended up getting a first job as a health coach for a weight loss company, which was obviously kind of what started me on my journey now. And I ended up deferring a master's in applied physiology to go ahead and go with this job for a bit. And it was really where I started to apply kind of what I learned at uni around exercise psychology and start developing coaching skills, and realize the importance of mindset behind changing our lifestyle, how so much of it is habit, addressing the things holding us back, which we kind of call as a coach limiting beliefs or barriers. And I started to develop a real interest in how our thoughts and the words that we choose affect our behaviour, how it was so much more than just, nutrition. But I did really miss the nutrition and physiology side, as well as having a few questions about how the nutrition element of that particular program was delivered. It was a very big focus on calorie restriction. So I ended up switching master's courses to something that incorporated all of those things, because it wasn't just nutrition, wasn't just exercise, physiology or psychology. It's a combination of everything, which kind of took me down the road of doing my personalised nutrition, becoming a registered nutritionist alongside doing some things around neuro-linguistic programming, coaching, and other coaching models. And I've been really lucky in that I've worked with such a variety of people and companies, all working towards helping people to manage their lifestyle, whether that relates to type 2 diabetes, other chronic conditions, or just general health and well-being, preventative health, that kind of thing. So I've always also kind of experienced a lot of own personal benefit through learning about nutrition and changing things myself around addressing low energy, addressing anxiety, that kind of thing, which gave me my own kind of personal experience in viewing how important nutrition is from a nourishing perspective, not just from a fuel perspective. So that's me, my long and winding journey to where I am today.
Yeah, I've been in the industry for about 10 years as well, so quite similar
Yeah.
time, and you've probably seen things changing quite similarly in a similar fashion to I have as well. And I think today we're going to talk about the title of the episode is it really just about a calorie deficit? So before we talk about that, I think, I don't know if you'll agree with me, like maybe 10 years ago, if someone wanted to to lose weight. It really was just a case of, okay, so you need to go on a diet. And at that point, I think it was mostly slimming clubs and things like that people went to. There wasn't really such a thing as digital like coaching or like online programs or anything. Like social media wasn't even really that big 10 years ago. So although we were being bombarded with all this like health noise, it wasn't quite as bad as it is today. And I think more recently, I've seen anyway, probably about in the last 4 or 5 years, and in particular in the last 2, I think there's a lot of well, I hear a lot of the words calorie deficit being sort of banded around a lot.
Yes, absolutely.
And I think it's another one of these like buzz terms that people are picking up and thinking, okay, this makes sense. So they're switching now from hashtag dieting to hashtag calorie deficit.
Yeah.
So I thought
it's all about the buzz term of the moment, isn't it?
Yeah, that's it, isn't it? And it's something that I did for a long time, years and years ago. And it's one of the main reasons why I feel like I am sort of shouting in the middle of a massive field full of people and no one can hear me, to try and stop people from going down that route, because from my own personal experience, I actually felt like that was like put me in a worse place than like going to a slimming club. So I'm like, oh, let's talk about this, because it's just about so much more. But first of all, is it true? So is it the only important thing when it comes to losing weight being in what we call a calorie deficit?
100% categorically no.
Yeah.
I think, whilst of course an energy imbalance or energy deficit is required to see weight loss, I think just thinking about it as a calorie deficit is far too reductionist and a massive oversimplification of essentially what is a very complex system as a human being, not only our physiology, where our body is kind of continuously adapting to our environment, but also psychologically. We're not taking into account the individual differences and challenges people experience, which can affect the way that we see the world or what our health behaviours look like. I think to elaborate on that, if that's okay, Rachel.
Yeah, absolutely.
There's kind of 3 areas in which this kind of viewpoint can be a little bit of a challenge. And firstly, it assumes that we're a very simple in-out system physiology-wise. If we eat X amount of calories and expend X amount of calories, we'll get this amount of weight loss. There's this whole thing banded around about 1 pound of fat is 3,500 calories, so we'll have to burn 3,500 to lose a pound. We know that's not true. We know it doesn't happen like that. We've got complexities of our gut bacteria, in which research is coming out every day around showing that we process nutrients in very different ways depending on the bacterial species, and that varies from person to person. And we've got a central regulation system which adjusts our energy expenditure and our intake of calories based on the environment around us, what we're feeding, how much we're moving. We're not just a simple physiological system of X minus X equals X. So secondly, it brings way too much focus to just the calorie. I don't know if you found this. It's not just about, the calorie as an amount. It's about the quality of the calorie. Even if we're eating these kind of low-cal foods that get under a calorie umbrella, some of my favourites that baffle me are things like breakfast biscuits, and yogurts, which are clearly emblazoned as low fat but can be quite high sugar. If we're choosing these kind of foods, are we choosing foods which essentially nourish us and make us feel good? It's not only the calories and macros that we need to consider. It's things like micronutrients, vitamins and minerals like magnesium, vitamin D. These things play a huge role throughout our whole body processes, energy, hormone production, immune system, waste removal, that kind of thing. So we really need to consider nourishment and choosing nutrient-filled foods to support the proper functioning of our body, and that can be a really nice positive focus for people because it's focusing on things that make them feel good, as opposed to this external pressure of, oh, I must focus on 1,200 calories a day because I need to change myself. And finally, it doesn't consider anything else which is going on for people in their lives. It doesn't consider the fact that this individual might be dealing with poor sleep, challenging work routines, things that might impact upon dealing with chronic stress, which is a massive one. In fact, probably a 21st century epidemic, when it comes to stress. And there's research ongoing about kind of the exact physiological mechanism as to how chronic stress impacts upon our eating, but we have to understand that there is something happening physically that impacts upon our ability to choose foods that are helpful to developing this healthy lifestyle. And we definitely have a tendency towards these energy dense, high sugar and fat in combination foods. And in practice, addressing stress first can have a huge impact on our eating habits. I've worked with people who have literally looked at having to change their whole entire job in order to manage stress. But the difference that went on, or followed even, from just changing that job made such a big impact on the way that she was able to manage her eating and exercise and feeling the way she felt emotionally. Her general well-being was so much better. Stress is pervasive into so many different areas of our life, and I see people blaming themselves for being able to stick to, a specific calorie plan or something like that when they're stressed. But it goes deeper than just a personal inability. There's things happening on a physical level. So my advice to people is always, don't beat yourself up when you're stressed about food. Just do your best, address the stress first, and consider other things in your lifestyle in combination over and above food, which is often where a coach can really help to provide clarity around that.
Yeah, definitely. I think you pretty much answered all the questions that I was going to have, following up from that one. But I think for me, the most important point that you made there, one of the most important points, was that a calorie is a unit of energy, and it doesn't take into account everything else that you've got going on in your life. I often found myself feeling guilty if I couldn't stick to this calorie and macronutrient target that someone had set me. I used to feel guilty about it, and I would put off going to friends' houses for dinner for fear of not knowing how many calories were in something. And I'm laughing to myself now, but looking back, I think, how could I not see how strange my behaviour was back then? But it really doesn't take into account anything really. Who you eat with, where you're eating, how much money you've got to spend on food, who you live with, all of these things. And that's why I get so quite I suppose, I don't know if angry is the right emotion, but I feel quite emotional about the whole calorie deficit thing, because I can see people, because it is so popular at the moment, and it does give people freedom from dieting, so it does give them that ability to say, okay, I've got a calorie allowance, I can pretty much eat whatever I want as long as I don't go over this. So I suppose it does take away some of the food rules of good and bad in a way, but from my point of view, I just don't think that it's the way to go in the long term for anybody really. I can't imagine scanning food into apps like MyFitnessPal for the rest of my life.
It's completely unsustainable, and it doesn't fit in with life. Calorie counting is a relatively recent phenomenon in terms of history. We didn't find people counting calories kind of in the first half of the 1900s yet. Lots of people still managed to maintain their weight. And it's something which lots of people come to me with, and they say, oh, I've had some success with counting calories in the past, but ultimately I've just gone back to where I was before. So it's not addressing the deeper issue of, it's just perhaps a short-term fix, which might see you lose a little bit of weight, but, maybe you're not thinking about nutrition and how healthy you should be feeling by the food that you're choosing. And actually it's not addressing the lifestyle change side of it, which is when something is approached from a lifestyle change perspective, it's viewed as a lot more long-term, and you have different goals around health and well-being as opposed to just lose weight, which we know it isn't having success for people.
Yeah. Are there any ways, or is there any reason why counting calories would be a good thing, for certain circumstances? Like, is there a place for it in certain circumstances?
I think that's a really good question, and there's a lot around at the moment what people might have heard of called the direct trial, and that is around helping population of people who are managing type 2 diabetes achieve remission within kind of 6 years of their diagnosis, and that involves a very, very strict regime of 850 calories a day, made up of soups and shakes, which is all dietitian supervised, between 8 to 20 weeks, followed up with a lot of support of how to help these people get back to, or get to a point where they are sustaining a healthy lifestyle. But we have to remember this is a clinical population. This is around trying to help people get back to a point pre-pathophysiology so they can live a healthy lifestyle. And to do that, it's better to do that as quickly as possible. But it can, doing that kind of fasting diet can have long-term ramifications on your eating psychology and the way that you look at food. And also these people have to be heavily supported and will be heavily supported within trials in order to help them to develop healthy lifestyle habits. So it's not just about that short-term phase of getting them back to that kind of pre-type 2 diabetes, but it's about the long-term as well, how you help people to sustain that, how you help them to input healthy habits. And that bit isn't about calorie counting. So that would be a situation in which I might say that we consider it, but that is a clinical trial, not everyday life.
Oh, absolutely. I was wondering what your thoughts on that were, because I work for the National Diabetes Prevention Programme up here in Yorkshire.
Yeah,
we do talk about calories a little bit, but I like the way that they've done it, and that it's more of a behaviour change approach. So I'm okay with that.
Yeah, I know, it's an interesting one, isn't it? It's getting the balance right, and actually it's seen some very promising results, and really helping people when we know type 2 diabetes is quite pervasive. Unfortunately, in this country in 2018, as you know, we had 3.8 million people, which had increased from 100,000 from the year before. 90% of those were managing type 2 diabetes.
It's crazy, isn't it?
I know, it's mad. So anything that we can do there is really important to help them post-diagnosis, but of course anything that we can do pre-diagnosis to help people not get to that point of having developed type 2 diabetes is so key, and that's where kind of this lifestyle behaviour change comes in.
Yeah. So let's talk about other lifestyle factors and things. I think you've covered some of them, but what other factors affect our weight sort of on a day-to-day, month-to-month, year-to-year basis besides calories?
Yeah, okay, I could talk about that
forever. we might need to split this into a two-parter.
Yeah, we got another 40 minutes. I think it really, really varies by individual. And I generally look at this about kind of weight and well-being, what can affect our, because anything that affects our well-being knocks onto our eating behaviours. So we can think about it in a very holistic way here. Stress, I've already massively touched on, and that is a huge thing that people deal with. I won't go over that again. Lack of support can be very difficult when we're starting a lifestyle change and we're trying to make a difference to our weight. Having a lack of support from family and friends around us can actually be one of the key variables that impacts people's ability to be able to stick with a lifestyle change or put in place a lifestyle change in the long term. So bringing people along with you on your change can be great. At Liva, as well as coach support, one of our priorities is having a peer support network so people can make their change alongside other people, which leads to more sustainable outcomes for people. Even doing it with a friend or finding a Facebook group, people that share your goals.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, so useful. Knowledge, I think, is a huge one. As you said earlier, we've got all this information coming at us from all different angles. Social media, food industry, general media. Where do we start? The information can be so overwhelming. I think, first of all, looking at working with an experienced professional, qualified professional, questioning the sources that you're getting it from. Is it evidence-based? Is it grounded in science? Can you check that? These are all really important things. Poor sleep can definitely affect our weight and well-being. So addressing sleep is a big thing that we would do as part of a lifestyle change if that is poor for someone, around looking at caffeine, looking at their bedtime routines, time pressures and prioritising. Lots of the time people might not have, or not perceive to have time in their life for things like going shopping or going to an exercise class, something like that. Scheduling can really help, as well as reframing our health as a priority, or having a look at our life and seeing, what can I delegate? What do I really need to do here? That can be useful as a little bit of a conversation or jotting points down. Another big one is where we perceive we come in the pecking order of life. I think that's very common amongst mums even. You might have found this, Rachel, where it's very commonly they kind of put their own needs below the needs of everyone else in the family.
Oh yeah, absolutely, all the time.
And it's understandable, I get that, but at the same time it's helping people to see your health's important too. So helping people, or catching them in that mindset, which they might not realise that they're doing or thinking about either. Socialising.
Yeah.
Another one mentioned earlier. Learning how to deal with food choices, alcohol, going out and having unsupportive friends around you. Oh, come on, have a pudding. That kind of thing. So it's developing, being able to do all of those things, because food is a part of life, and it's important that we go out and we spend time with friends, because socialising and having those friends around us is also another important aspect of health. So learning how to manage that and developing slowly over time confidence in own self-ability to choose a healthy lifestyle, and that comes with time. It comes with practice and having successful experiences. And I could go on and on, but I guess importantly the final one would be thinking about, how are you thinking about a lifestyle change when you approach it? When it comes to your weight and your well-being, are you thinking about it as a short-term calorie counting blast where you can fall off the wagon and go back to your normal habits? Or are you thinking about it as a long-term change where, balance, having the occasional pizza, moderation, it's all part of it. It's not falling off the wagon. It's part of a balanced life. It's about being consistent and not choosing to be perfect. And I think that can really help, not only with well-being, but from a weight perspective as well.
Yeah, absolutely. And something that we've covered quite a lot. I think there's like 7 or 8 things there, and that's not even starting to mention like the subconscious effect of things like food marketing is having on our choices. And I know that's like probably another like a topic for a completely different podcast. I mean, we could probably talk for about 10 hours on this, because I've become quite interested in like public health recently, and like the public health messages and tackling food marketing and nudging in supermarkets and all sorts of interesting things. But what are your, I know I didn't put this in the outline, I might just put you on the spot with this question here. But what are people, like if you could choose maybe 1 or 2 things that people might want to look out for, you know, in terms of while they're in the supermarket or while they're out and about, when it comes to food marketing, you know, we're constantly being bombarded and we're buying things sometimes without even realising that someone somewhere has nudged us to buy it. What are your thoughts?
Yeah, I mean, my God, it's so complex, isn't it? The things that we're dealing with every single day. You know, I looked at this public health paper on which was made by a group called the Obesity Foresight Group, which mapped out the intricacies of the challenges we're experiencing as a nation and anything that can contribute to weight gain. And honestly, it could have been on a kind of A3 piece of paper, and I still had to zoom in on everything. I could barely see, it was so detailed. And that was described as an oversimplification, which is mad. But, you know, the food industry is a huge part of our challenges. I think we really need to be mindful of misleading marketing or promises. You know, marketing companies are very clever at getting us to buy their brands. Labels that shout out at us as low fat or low calorie. You know, are these things high in sugar? Can we check the food labels? There's a lot of misinformation out there. We've got as well kind of childhood brand loyalty, which is established when we're so young. And it's good to be mindful of that. You know, have you got a particular brand which you always go for? When do you remember the last time that you switched up or perhaps tried to make something yourself? We have a very strong default preference nature, which means we don't like change that much as humans, and we always tend to go for the same thing. So being mindful of that in yourself and thinking about alternatives can be a really good idea. Maybe an example of that might be perhaps you always go for a certain like jar of tomato sauce or something that you choose to have with your pasta, which is pre-made. Lots of these are extremely high in sugar. Can you buy a tin of tomatoes and onions and garlic and make it yourself, as it doesn't take too long? You know, so little things like that, choosing alternatives, reading food labels, considering how many ingredients are in a food. So when you have a look at the label, are there a whole bunch of things that you can't pronounce on there, or is it quite close to its natural form with no added sugar? Foods which are closer to their natural form generally don't come in packets, might be a better option for you to consider. And I think as well, you know, I'm not a public health expert by any means, but you've also got to consider the area where you live. You know, sometimes in various different pockets of the UK, especially the more deprived areas, we've got things cropping up called food swamps, which is where we've got this plethora of just junk food available, and often that affects children. We've got much less choice of healthy options. So whilst obviously we can control our choices, all of these environmental factors can make it really difficult for us to take personal responsibility for what we're choosing, because they're in our face all the time. So just simply being aware, appreciating that it takes time to develop new habits and being patient with yourself, understanding that these are real challenges that people deal with, focusing on kind of those whole foods as close to nature as possibly can, and don't believe the hype when it comes to food advertising. Reading food labels and really questioning your food sources can be really useful.
Yeah, that's exactly what I would have said as well. And let's, before we wrap up, let's just briefly talk about, I mean, you spoke about that you use long-term habit change and behaviour change approaches with the people that you work with. You probably see this as well, but and you know, I still experience it myself. I think we all do. It really is that sort of desire to see really like profound changes in a short space of time. I think it must just be the way that we're wired.
Yes.
And I completely understand that, you know, when I have someone that comes to me and you can almost see the desperation in people's faces of I need to do something now, or something needs to change now. So how do we get, you know, if for the people that are listening to the podcast that are probably either have felt like that or are feeling like that right now, what advice would you give to someone, you know, to help them understand the importance of following a longer term approach when it's maybe not what they really want at the moment?
Yeah, absolutely. I think, you know, it is a really difficult one. And of course, when we don't feel happy about something, we want to change it quickly. And that is completely understandable. And I think as well, in today's culture, we're very used to an immediacy of things. So we've developed this mindset of wanting things quite quickly, which of course is attractive to people in a lifestyle that we live in with lots of things. And I think a lot of people can play with this, but particularly in social media with things like detox teas and that kind of thing, promising fast results. I think that from a coaching perspective, it can really help to understand and explore the reasons behind, you know, what is making that you want to change so quickly? What is making you really want that result now? You know, what is the deeper meaning behind wanting to lose the weight? There often is. Is it so you can feel more comfortable in your clothes, that you can have more happiness in your day-to-day, more confidence at work, with your friends and yourself, feel more like you again, have more energy for your family? You know, there are so many different things that underpin someone's reason behind wanting to lose the weight, and that is often only the top line. So often exploring these goals a little bit more can help to really shift mindset to the approach of a health and well-being mindset, instead of let's just lose weight loss as quickly as we can. And, you know, making changes to your general health and mental well-being and focusing on those things like more energy, more confidence, feel more like me again, aside from weight, can really help with introducing small but significant changes. And you can actually make changes quite quickly to the way that you feel emotionally over a short amount of time. That can be quite a positive reinforcing feeling in linking up the food habits and the health habits that you're choosing alongside continuing that, because you want to sustain the successes that you're having and the positive feelings that you're experiencing. So that's how I would take that approach with people. I wonder if that's similar to what you might do.
Oh yeah, absolutely. Yeah, completely. I think I couldn't agree more. I think, you know, there is a place for, you know, some quick wins along the way, especially in the beginning, just to give you that little boost of, you know, mentality. Okay, this might actually work for me, and then just putting in the work in the background, sort of changing one little thing at a time and trying to see it all add up to the big picture. It's hard to see the big picture sometimes when you're sitting in the thick of it, but that's what I sort of teach in Ditch the Diet. Is one of the first things we talk about is sort of trying to sit back from the just now and look at the big picture, and then break it down into, you know, okay, well, what do I need to do? What do I need to do every month? What do I need to do every week? And then break it right down into, okay, what are the small little things that I can do each day, you know, that will all add up to that big picture. Sort of flash forward, I suppose, of where do I want to be this time next year, and what are the tiny little things?
Yeah, I think writing it down is so important. I listened to your podcast as well around habits, which was so on point around making very small changes, not doing everything at once, but making those small little changes, keep visualizing what that bigger picture looks like. Maybe you write it down somewhere, you can come back and remind yourself of the reasons behind why you're choosing this lifestyle change. And I think in that way, in the way that you've described, you can almost reframe the weight loss as becoming kind of a happy side effect of all the helpful, well-being, supportive and nourishing changes that you're making to your daily life.
Oh yeah, definitely. Sounds like we're very much on the same page.
Yeah, we should grab a coffee.
Yeah, definitely.
We can talk for 3 hours.
Yeah, let's do it. Whereabouts in the UK are you?
I'm down in Brighton and Hove,
okay.
But yes, I think I'm probably the other end of the island from you.
I'm in South Yorkshire.
I'm in London a lot though, and also Copenhagen, because some of the wider Liva team are based over there. So it's quite cool, quite a global company.
Yeah, absolutely. I've never been to Copenhagen, but it's like on my bucket list.
Oh, it's beautiful.
Yeah, I bet.
Definitely recommend.
Now I want to go and look for flights.
Yeah, do it. Get on Skyscanner straight away.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much for your time today. I think it's safe to say that the answer to the initial question, is it really just about a calorie deficit, is an absolute no. And hopefully the listeners have taken away some serious amount of positive information there, and might just get the old cogs turning, thinking, is this really the way forward, or should I be thinking about a more long-term approach? So thank you, it's been a great insight today. And tell me about, if anyone wants to find out more information about what you do you have a way of being contacted, or do you even want to be contacted? I always forget to ask people that. I'm like, do you want me to share your details?
Well, my mobile number, no. Absolutely. I'm on Instagram at Anna Cummings and annacummings.co.uk, and also Liva Healthcare is the personal health coaching company that I work for at the moment. So you can Google us and find us online if you want to learn a little bit more.
Great, I'll do that, and I'll add all the links into the show notes. So if you're listening to the episode and you want to find out more, just scroll down on your screen and all the links should be there for you. And thanks again for joining me.
Thank you so much.
So yay for another episode of the podcast. I hope you enjoyed that one. It's definitely one of my favourites. A right good discussion about how there is so much more to our health and lifestyle than calories. Certainly one to think about anyway. So thank you very much for listening. Just before you go, if you have enjoyed this episode, a couple of things you could do for me that would be really, really useful. One of them is to leave a little review of the podcast if you're on Apple Podcasts right now. Scroll down on your screen where you'll find all of the links that we've talked about in the episode, and also right at the bottom an opportunity to leave a review for the podcast. It will only take you 2 seconds and I would really, really appreciate it. Second thing, if you know someone else that might enjoy this episode, please share it with them on social media, or pop them a wee text and tell them to Google the Ditch the Diet podcast. The more people we can have listening, the better. So thank you very much for doing that, and I'll be back next week with the second instalment of our little macronutrient myth busting, so the truth about carbs. So look out for that one next week, and I'll see you then. Take care.